Good morning, student. Yesterday we have come to know how the narrator had started his journey for Kora. On his way, he took a driver whose name was Seaton and an interpreter whose name was Daniel. Now, when till now his journey was going on smoothly, he could find no problem. But now, when he was climbing the mountain, he developed a physical problem. His nose got blocked. He was feeling pain in his ears. Now, what happened? As soon as they saw the snow coming towards them, they jumped out of their vehicle. A swath of white stuffy lay across the track in front of us, stretching for maybe 15 meters before it pettered out. Pettered out means it melted out and the dirt trail reappeared. So there was a stone who it was 15 meters, you can say, that has covered their track. The snow continued on either side of us, smoothing the abrupt bank on the upside side. The bank was too steep for a vehicle to scale. The bank means the edge which where they were going to climb. It was so steep, slippery that they were not able to climb. The vehicle was not able to move smoothly. So there was no way around the snow patch. I joined Daniel as Ethan stepped on to the encrusted snow and began to slither and slide forward, stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain how sturdy it was. I looked at my wristwatch. We were at 5,210 meters above sea level. The snow didn't look too deep to me, but the danger wasn't its depth. Daniel said, so much as its icy top layer. If we slip off, the car could turn over. So Daniel is saying the main thing is that the slope top of the snow. If their vehicle will what slid down, then they are going to what fall. He suggested, as we saw Seaton grab handful of dirt and fling them across the frozen surface. We both pitched in, and when the snow was spread with soil, Daniel and I stayed our vehicle to lighten Seaton's load. He backed up and drove towards the dirty snow, eased the car on its icy surface, and slowly drove its length without apparent difficulty. So what happened? Seaton started throwing the mud, you can say, on the snow. When Daniel and this narrator saw, they also started helping Seaton. Now the whole snow was covered or filled with dust. And then Seaton was able to drive his vehicle without any difficulty. But the writer, narrator, and Daniel, they were not traveling with Seaton because of the load. If it will be too much loaded, again the ice will melt and then they will find it difficult to drive. 10 minutes later, we stop at another blockage. Not good, sir, Seaton announced as he jumped out again. Again, they met a blockage to survey the scene. This time, he decided to try and drive around the snow. The slope was steep and studded with major rock. Once they met the snow, they were able to drive through the snow by putting the dirt on it. Now they found what? Another blockage, and this time there were the huge rocks. The vehicle has to take the turn, you can say it has to go through those rocks. But somehow Seaton negotiated them. He was passing or driving through those rocks, his four wheels drive vehicle lurching from one obstacles for the other. In so doing, he cut off one of the hairpin bends of the car, regaining the trail further up where the snow had not drifted. I checked my watch again as we continued to climb in the bright sunshine. We crept past, means we passed through 5,400 meters, and my head began to throb horribly. There was a pain, instant pain in the head of the narrator. I took glove from my water bottle, which is supposed to help a rapid ascent. We finally reached the top of pass at 5,500 meters. It was marked by a large cairn of rocks, festooned mist-tied with white silk scarf and ragged prayer flags. We all looked turned towards the cairn in a clockwise direction, as it is a tradition, and Seaton checked the tires on his vehicle. He stopped at the petrol tank and partially unscrewed the top. so that the petrol could be filled into the vehicle, which emitted a loud hiss. The lower atmospheric pressure was allowing the fuel to expand. It sounded dangerous to me. Maybe, sir, Sita laughed, but no smoking. My headache soon cleared as we came down the other side of pass. It was 2 o'clock by the time we stopped for lunch. We ate hot noodles inside a long canvas tent, part of a workman erected beside dry salt lake. The plateau is pockmarked with salt flat and brackish lake. Vestige means portion, some portion of it is ocean which bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted it skyward. This one was a hive of activity. Means this area he found that maximum population were there. The people were doing the work. They met a salt lake. Men with pickaxes and shovel trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coat and salt encrusted boots. So they were collecting the salt. All wore sunglasses against the glare as a steady stream of blue truck emerged from a blinding white lake laden with piles of salt. So here the narrator could see the maximum activities which was going on because it was a salt river. The trucks were there, people, they were gathering the salt and they were putting it in the truck. By late afternoon, we had reached the small town of Hor, back on the main east-west highway that followed the old trade routes from Lhasa to Kashmir. Daniel, who was returning to Lhasa, found a ride in a truck, so Seetan and I bade him farewell outside the tire repair shop. So Daniel has to return back to Lhasa, so he found somebody who was going back to Lhasa. He went to with them, and then we had supper to puncture in quick succession on the drive down from the Salt Lake. And Seetan was eager to have them fixed since they left him with no spare. Beside the second tire, he had been replaced by one that was smooth as my bald head. So the narrator is telling that the tire has become so smooth by driving that it is now looking like a bald head. Now, this narrator is describing about a place which is called Hor. Hor was a grim means it was not a happy place to see. It was sad place. Miserable means not very good. People will not feel happy coming here. There were no vegetation, no plants, nothing was there whatsoever. Just dust and rocks was there. Liberally scattered with years of accumulated refuse, garbage everywhere. There were the garbage, which was unfortunate given that town sat on shore of Lake Mansarovar. So why the narrator is saying about Hor, that Hor is not a place to be visited or to be remembered, because that place is filled with dirt and dust. The people who are coming or going for a Mansarovar, Lake Mansarovar, they just throw their or they just dump their garbage at Hor. Tibet's most venerated stretch of water. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoint Mansarovar as the source of 4 great Indian rivers. So why Mansarovar is considered to be an holy place, or you can say the holiest place, because ancient Hindus and the Buddhists, cosmology means one who study about the stars and all. They say that Mansarovar is the source of 4 great Indian rivers. The 4 great Indian rivers, they had their origin at Mansarovar. Those rivers are the Indus, the Ganges, the Satluj, and Brahmaputra. Actually, only the Satluj flow from the lake, but the headwater of others all rise nearby in the flank of Mount Kailash. We were within striking distance of a great mountain, and I was eager to forge ahead. Forge ahead means move. But I had to wait. Seetan told me to go and drink some tea in Ho's only cafe, which, like all the other building in town, was constructed from badly painted concrete and had 3 broken windows. The good view of the lake through one of them helped to compensate for the drought. Drought means dry. Actually, the Hor was, you can say, a driest place, one of the dirtiest place in Tibet, because the people who are going for their Mansarovar Yatra, they dump the garbage at Hor. And then there was only one cafe whose condition was also not good. But the poet is saying what is there to compensate is that one could look through the cafe of that window and they could see what? They could see a lake, a beautiful lake. I was served by a Chinese youth in military uniform who spread the grease around on my table with a filthy, means dirty rag before bringing me a glass and a thermos of tea. Half an hour later, Seaton relieved me from my solitary means alone confinement, and we drove past a lot more rocks and rubbish westward. Rubbish means the garbage out of town towards Mount Kailash. So after that, they again started their journey towards Mount Kailash. But Hor, a narrator is saying one of the dirtiest place when people will be going for the Mansarovar Yatra, they will come to a town called Hor, and that is not going to be a very beautiful place which is going to make them happy. That would consider to be one of the dirtiest place because not of the people who are living here, but the people who are going for Mansarovar Yatra, they dump the garbage here. My experience in Hor came back as a stark contrast to account I had read of earlier traveler. First encounter with Lake Mansarovar, Ekat Kawaguchi, a Japanese monk who had arrived there in 1900, was so moved by the scenicity, means sacredness of the lake, that he burst into tears. A couple of later, the hollowed water had a similar effect on Stephen Heading, a Swede who wasn't prone to sentimental outbursts. So this narrator is saying that not just come here out of a passion and all. I have read about these two people. Is it clear who had described about the beauty and the holy and richness of Lake Mansarovar that it had compelled him to take a journey of Kora. It was dark by the time we finally left again, and later 10:30 p.m. we drew up outside a guest house in Dachin for what turned out to be another trouble night. So now he is staying in a place called Dachin, and it is going to be a worse night for this narrator. Kicking around in an open air rubbish dump that passed from town of Four had set up my cold once more. Though I truth be told, it had never quite disappeared with my herbal tea. Though he got herbal tea, but still the suffering which he had, that cold, the blockage of nose was there with him. One of my nostrils was blocked again, and as I lay down to sleep, I wasn't convinced that the other would provide me with sufficient oxygen. Means when he was sleeping or he was trying to sleep, one of his nostrils blocked. So he was finding it difficult to get enough oxygen from his one of the nostril which was open. My watch told me I was about 4,760 meter. It wasn't much higher than Ravu. And there I had been gasping for oxygen several times every night at Ravu also. I had grown accustomed to this nocturnal disturbance by now, but they still scared me. Nocturnal means the activities which takes place at night. Tired and hungry, I started breathing through my mouth. After a while, I switched to single nostril power, which seemed to be admitting enough oxygen. But just I was drifting off. He was just sleeping off. Again, he woke up abruptly all of a sudden. The narrator was finding it difficult to breathe, difficult to sleep because one of his nostrils was totally blocked. As he was trying to take oxygen with the one nostril that was open and he was trying to sleep, suddenly he woke up. Something was wrong. Something was telling him that something was wrong with him. My chest felt strangely heavy. He could feel his chest heavy. He could not breathe. And I sat up. A moment that cleared my nasal passage almost instantly and relieved the feeling in my chest. Curious, I thought. So what happened? Curious, I thought. If all of a suddenly he got up. When he got up, his chest was clear. The nostril was clear. And he could feel easy to breathe. And he was curious. But again, when he lied down, again the same thing happened. He was not able to sleep. He find it difficult to breathe. The moment he used to sit, he used to feel good. And this way it went out throughout the night. It must have been those emergency electrical impulses again, but this was not the same as on previous occasion. This time I wasn't gasping for breath. I was simply allowed not to go to sleep. Earlier he was feeling it difficult to breathe, but this time he was finding it that he could not sleep. Sitting up once more immediately made me feel better. I could breathe freely and my chest felt fine. But soon as I lay down, my sinuses filled and my chest was odd. Again, I find it difficult. I tried propping myself upright against the wall, but now I couldn't manage to relax enough to drop off. He could not sleep. I couldn't put my fingers on the reason, but I was afraid to go to sleep because he knew very well that if he tried to sleep, might be he would never wake up. A little voice inside me was saying that if I did, I might never wake up again. So I stayed awake all night. A voice somewhere inside him was telling him that if you sleep, might be you will never wake up. You might die in your sleep. Seaton took me to the Dachin Medical College the following morning. The medical college at Dachin was new and looked like a monastery, yes, because they are Buddhist, so actually everything will be like a Buddhist. From the outside, with a very solid door that led into a large courtyard, we found the consulting room, which was dark and cold, and occupied by Tibetan doctor who wore none than a paraphernalia that I'd been expecting. No white coat, he looked like any other Tibetan with a thick pullover and a woolly hat. He thought that the doctor might not be wearing a white dress. What he expected, he has seen the doctor was wearing a thick sweater and a woolly hat. When I explained my sleepless symptoms and my sudden aversion, fear to lying down, he shot me a few questions while feeling the vein in my wrist. It's a cold, he said firmly to Seaton, and cold an effect of altitude. I will give you something for it. I asked him if he thought I would recover enough to be able to do the Kora. He said, yes, you will be fine. I walked out of medical college clutching a brown envelope stuffed with 15 skews of paper. Small papers were there. I had 5-day course of within medicine, which I started right away. I opened an after breakfast package and found it contained a brown powder that I had to take with hot water. It tasted just like cinnamon. Cinnamon means dalchini. The content of lunchtime and bedtime package were less obviously identifiable. Means once he could identify the breakfast medicine, but rest he could not. Both contain small spherical brown pellet, छोटे-छोटे दवाइयां like a homeopathic. They look suspiciously like sheep dung, but of course I took them. That night, after my first full day course, I slept very soundly like a log, not a dead man. So he said, the whole day I took my medicine after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner medicine, and that night I slept very soundly without any kind of problem. Like a log, not a dead man. I was sleeping like a piece of wood, not a dead man. Means I could move, I could see, I could feel. Once he saw that I was going to leave, Sita left me to return to Lhasa. As a Buddhist, he told me he knew that it didn't really matter if I passed away, but he thought it would be a bad for business. So Sita is saying, as a Buddhist, he believed that if the narrator would have died, Sita would have not felt sorry for him. But he thought of his business purpose that if the narrator would have died of cold, then nobody would have hired in, or nobody would hire Seaton in future. He was thinking about his business. Dajin didn't look so horrible after a good night's sleep. It was still dusty, partially derelict. Derelict means neglected, in a bad condition, and punctuated, filled by heaps of rubble and refuse. Here also, like Hor, but like Hor, it is not that dirtiest place. But the sun shone brilliantly in a clear blue sky, and the outlook across the plain to the south gave me a vision of the Himalayas, commanded by huge snow-capped mountain, Gulla Mandhata, with the just waves of clouds suspended over its summit. Summit means mountain. I think clear. It is clear. Tomorrow we will do again.